Good morning and good afternoon, good evening. I wish to extend a warm welcome to all participants and thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Manuel Martinez Miralles and I will be your moderator for the second day of this webinar. I am UNIDIR's liaison officer in New York, and I'm also a researcher with the Conventional Arms and Ammunition Program. And for those who don't know, UNIDIR is an independent and autonomous institute within the UN, focusing on disarmament and international security related matters. And our goal is to assist the international community to develop practical and innovative ideas needed to find solutions to those critical security problems that we see every day. And one of them, of course, is the issue of safety and security of conventional ammunition. So as we did yesterday in our first seminar, I will start with some housekeeping announcements. So in case it is necessary today, we have put in place measures to deal with disruptions. This is a secure platform and all participants have joined using their unique personalized links. However, should the virtual platform be compromised, we will close it down and launch a new meeting on Zoom. And if that happens, new access links will be emailed to you immediately, and we should be able to resume the event within 5 minutes. This is just a backup measure, and I'm very confident that we won't have to resort to do this. For information, we have 300 registrations at this webinar. It's great news. So the registered participants represent member states from various geographic regions, different UN agencies, international and regional organizations, as well as civil society and the private sector. And this not only shows the wide and multi-stakeholder nature of the problem, but also points to the interest to make comprehensive efforts to find a solution. So, as I said, participants joining as attendees will have their cameras and microphones off by design, but please, I would strongly encourage that you post questions in the Q&A function at any time during the event. Don't wait until the end. If there's something interesting, and I'm sure there will, that our panelists are sharing, go ahead, ask your question, and post your comment. And for that, please use the Q&A function. As time permits, I will relay these questions to the floor or to the panelists that you indicate. And it would be useful if you indicate your name and affiliation when asking the questions. In case there are any questions that go unanswered because of the time, UNIDIR and the UNIDIR team will follow up with the panelists and provide you with a response bilaterally after the event. Also, for everyone's awareness, the webinar will be recorded and made available on UNIDIR's website and YouTube channel. So, as we stressed yesterday in the discussion, supporting and promoting safe and secure, sustainable through-life ammunition management at every level, at the national, sub-regional, and regional levels, is key to reduce conflict and violence. And yesterday, we identified safety and security risks as a substantive threat to livelihoods, to lives, and to communities. In yesterday's discussion, we had a chance to discuss about the history of ammunition process, the evolution and the progress made, namely through a group of governmental experts in 2020 and 2021, and the upcoming work of the open-ended working group this year and next year. And we were also able to identify some of the persisting gaps. Now, today's event will build on the background provided and will zoom into some of the more significant aspects of conventional ammunition management. And the discussion will look at practical experiences and will touch upon the role of industry, the issue of diversion, both in conflict and non-conflict settings. It will analyze prevention and effective responses to unplanned explosions, and also will draw the link between ammunition life cycle and gender mainstreaming. So to begin the panel, we have today 5 fantastic interventions, each of them lasting about 7 minutes. So we will go through them before we jump into the Q&A. The first intervention will be delivered by Mr. Robert Condor and will focus on lessons learned from industry on safety and security. Robert has several years of experience working with the arms industry, and in this capacity, he supported the process to enhance communication and coordination between industry and international export control authorities by introducing technical applications to increase safety and security within industry practices. He has participated in several UN processes, including the Arms Trade Treaty, and provided technical insight to the group of governmental experts on problems arising from the accumulation of conventional ammunition stockpiles in surplus in 2020. Robert, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Manuel. Thanks for the kind words, and very warm welcome to all the participants from all over the world. Time is very limited, so just let me go into the topic of industry's contribution to reduce the safety and security risk of different types of ammunition during their life cycle. Talking about different types of ammunition, I would like to differentiate between two types, basically, which is the explosive ammunition, which are bigger types of ammunition, and which is the non-explosive ammunition, which is a small caliber. We talk about calibers below 20 millimeter, and when we talk about explosive ammunition, we talk about calibers up to 120 millimeters. So marking and tracing of ammunition is of importance due to political, military, and warranty reasons for both customers and manufacturers, and logistical requirements, basically in order to enhance transparency and accountability, reduce the risk of diversion of ammunition, support political requirements on a national, regional, and international level, support life cycle and stockpile management, support end-use and post-shipment control, which has been introduced by some countries already successfully. Availability of tamper-proof solution is of importance, for example, for post-shipment control, but also for post-mortem identification in case of post-conflict scenarios. Machine-readable identification technology exists and facilitates the mass readout over the logistical process and during the lifetime of ammunition, and ensure complete and transparent flow of information and goods between all the actors is of importance. So it can be said that today the majority of ammunition manufacturers believe that existing legal requirements already create a high processing burden to them, and they are convinced that either the customers have to demand such requirements, or that it can be done by the governments. So actually, the manufacturers see themselves compliance regarding existing guidelines and requirements. So next slide, please. So the hardware solution for explosive ammunition, we talk about the bigger calibers, referring to anti-tank, anti-structure, anti-bunker, and anti-aircraft ammunition. We can see disposable and reusable type of ammunitions. There is a portfolio solution, just to mention three of them. One is a data matrix code, which can be implemented into ammunition, such type of ammunition. Also a type of metal foil, which can be integrated into such type of ammunition, and which has already been done. And even RFID tags, which also can be implemented to such type of ammunition. Especially the data matrix code and the RFID, they are feeding perfectly into stockpile management, post-mortem analysis, and post-shipment control, and also feeding into ERP, so-called enterprise resource planning system, as used by industry, by manufacturers. We talk about private or even state-owned industries. So having a closer look to RFID solution for explosive ammunition, I just want to show the example of a launch tube of anti-tank ammunition, as we can see it here in the picture. For the next slide, sorry, please. So we have a forensic tag here, which can be put, but we can also put a logistic tag. We can read with a reader this information, which can be used in a stand-alone system, but can be also used in the internet, in the cloud infrastructure to share with other warehouses or authorities. When we look into future options, the blockchain technology is also something we should look into it, because it's a very good and fantastic technology, and which can almost not be manipulated. Next slide, please. So also I want to refer to solutions for non-explosive ammunition, referring to small caliber ammunition. So the most known type of marking for such type of small caliber is stamping, which is being used for many decades all over the world. We can also see laser marking technologies which are being used more and more. For example, in Brazil, it's been used successfully. We can see that laser, we can engrave letters or figures, but we can also engrave barcodes to read them out. Another method is to mark small caliber ammunition are chemical taggants. Here we can see an example of a chemical taggant which is quite new, and it's still in pilot project phases, but already shown some successes in terms of post-mortem analysis capability, but also in terms to use it as an anti-deterrent. So marking is of essential importance for small caliber ammunition, especially referring to operative ammunition. So what does it mean, operative ammunition? It means ammunition becomes operative once it is unpacked. And by unpacking the ammunition, the ammunition loses a lot of its information. That's why it's important to mark ammunition also, if possible. Until today, there are no laws existing at international level. So the lessons learned show this, that in many missions, unmarked ammunitions, after unpacking them, lead to a surplus in stockpile. The next slide, please. So one issue is the marking of the ammunition, but important is to support the marking by tracing. So it needs a software solution for explosive and non-explosive ammunition. I don't want to go through all the details here, but you can have a look to it. We can see the stockpile management requirements. We can see inventory requirements, and also stock levels according for classifications. So there are different criteria which should be included in order to support the tracing of the existing ammunition and to have a better control of the stock of the ammunition. The next slide, please. So what are the conclusions to close my short presentation? Ammunition is most critical with respect to diversion, considering the size and the lifetime aspect. Most types of ammunitions are limited in their shelf life by the way and use of its critical chemical components, referring especially to explosive ammunition. Here we talk about explosive and the propellant. These are technical means to monitor for evaluation of aging effects over the life cycle. Industry has expertise to advise customers in demilitarization procedures. We call them EOD procedures, and application of appropriate equipment usage depending on the scenario and according to national political and ethical guidelines. It is possible to permanently mark and identify all types of ammunition nowadays. Registration and documentation of stocks and their changes is possible along latest industry standards. Software for data acquisition and management is available with interfaces to other logistics software. Track and trace of all types of ammunition is possible without physical inspection at the end user and with the help of modern data acquisition and software, which does not mean that post-shipment physical checks are not necessary. And to ensure proper use of regular certifications will be necessary. A software solution for monitoring ammunition is as an add-on to existing logistics systems will increase the acceptance of post-shipment inspections and can be considered as a trust-building measure. So what is the giveaway or the to take away lessons? Mainly beyond technical means for the control, industry can and must contribute more to conflict prevention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert, for this very concise but very rich presentation. It was very interesting to see the different technological solutions applied to different types of ammunition, and also to see how these technologies are applied differently, but having different purposes as well, to improve logistics, but also to improve safety and security. And I really got your point across on marking itself is not a magic solution or magical solution, but coupled with good record keeping and tracing could help reduce security risks. So thank you for that, and we'll have time on the Q&A to discuss some of this. Let me now turn to our second contribution today, which will be delivered by Mr. Angelo Bernat, and it will focus on effective prevention and responses to unplanned explosions at munition sites. Angelo works for the Mine Advisory Group, MAG, since 2011, and he's been covering several roles, now as Senior Technical Advisor on Weapons and Ammunition Management. And during his career within MAG, Angelo has served as Technical Operation Manager in several fragile settings, contributing to WAM-related operations in the Sahel, Somalia, as well as in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Angelo, over to you.
Thank you, Manuel. So, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to thank UNIDIR to let me, on behalf of MAG, Mine Advisory Group, to present a small part of intervention that MAG is doing in the field to support state to reduce the risk of an unplanned explosion at munition site. So I will not reintroduce myself, just reintroduce MAG. It's a British NGO who is working in humanitarian demining since 1989, and in WAM, so weapons and ammunition management, about 20 years now, in more than 20 countries, only for the WAM activities, not for the action. This short presentation will be in 3 parts. So a few examples of unplanned explosion from the last decade, what can be done on what MAG is doing, and where MAG is linked to the recommended life safety measure in the report from group of governmental experts on problems from accumulation on conventional ammunition stockpile in surplus. Next slide, please. So in 2012, in the Republic of Congo, the main national ammunition stockpile explodes a Sunday morning in the middle of the town, where all the ammunition, explosive, and weapons were concentrated in the same place, in the middle of the town, which permit to have an explosion in chain with a lot of choke ammunition protected all over the site. MAG was in country, and we were able to answer to this event very quickly by support and advise the national authority to respond in a safer way, which was possible to reduce the risk and impact and more accident with the EXO. After secure the dangerous area and evacuate dead and injured people, one of the first things put in place was the risk education on the risk on unexplosive ordnance to reduce the risk of additional accident by UXO. This risk education was very important, as a lot of people wanted at this time visit their home to be able to take some personal items and clothes. The second step was the clearance, without too much detail, but the amount of personnel, equipment, and funding were quite high. And just for the clearance activity, more than 2 years was needed to be able to clear the site, with more than 100 deminers on 1 to 5 heavy mechanical assets like armor front loader to be able to clear everything in the robbers. And obviously, the cost of the reallocation of people and reconstruction on infrastructure, when I say infrastructure, is not just ammunition depot, but also for the people, plus the purchase of new ammunition and weapon, these costs were very expensive. Next slide, please. So here you can see that there is 2 years ago a big unplanned explosion of ammonium nitrate occurred in the port of Beirut. Even if it was not an ammunition depot, the lack of efficient management system caused a large impact on the people and infrastructure around the port. You can read on the slide the numbers of deaths and injuries and the big amount of homeless and displaced people. Without details, but a unit in the neighborhood of the port with ammunition storage, surely because they have a good management system on their ammunition, which MAG supported, not have any secondary explosion. So just by the separation of a different kind of ammunition, we suppose that not any other explosion happened. This shows also the importance to take in consideration the environment of the facilities, and that even if you are following the regulation and standard, an unplanned explosion might be happen because of an external and unmanageable input. Next slide. More recently, in 2021, unplanned explosion in munition site happened in a quite similar profile than Brazzaville. The difference there was that for MAG was that we did not have any physical presence in the country and wasn't able to join because of the impossibility to have authorization to travel, issue with visa and other national authority. However, our community liaison teams worked from the first day on a numeric risk education packages to support in-country via social media, for example, Facebook, to put in place this risk education. This package was done on the experience on lesson learned after the unplanned explosion at munition site from Brazzaville. Next slide. So what can be done? Before to do anything, MAG is doing an initial risk assessment on ammunition to be able to give an efficient answer to issues, and or improvement to reduce the risk on unplanned explosion at munition site. MAG, with the support of donor, is assisting states to have a better ammunition management in the through life cycle management of ammunition, with the EATG as a reference, as a common standard since the beginning of this EATG since 2011, to avoid discordance between technician and training providers. For instance, many ammunition technicians from Francophone countries follow training in France, Morocco, China, and Russia. So obviously, this number of diverse standards cannot facilitate a good and easy management system. Hopefully, in the Safer Guard program, guidelines and mini toolkits are available to support state and organizations like us to increase the quality of their management system. Like the risk reduction list that we can find in this Safer Guard website, which should needs to be compliant with the 3 risk level, and also the quantity distance map, which can give you an idea if an unplanned explosion at munition site happens. Of course, in addition of the EATG, we are using international man action standard and modular small arm control implementation compendium, who is dealing with weapons management, and they are all linked together, and also the IMAS, as you can see on the slide. Next slide, please. Okay, as I already said, everything starts by the risk assessment. So to be able to do a proper base assessment, we are doing this assessment for ESH, so for explosive storage houses, and also for armories. The first thing very important for us is to clean up the stock by the disposal and restorage the ammunition, and to avoid to have a big amount of explosive in the same places, and to dispose on the all surplus and obsolete ammunition and weapon for us. We are also doing construction and refurbishment on facilities. So for some tasks like in Brazzaville, as you can see, we relocate the ammunition in another place to be sure if something happens that the impact on the population will decrease a lot. Also, when we do something, we do the capacity building. So by some trainings like the armory storekeeper or ammunition storekeeper and store manager, with inside including gender and environmental topics. In all our package, we put that to start to help people to understand better those topics. We also cover all the different levels of the hierarchy in the defense forces and security forces. from the storekeeper to the high ranking, like the people in charge of the order or the management of the ammunition, to be sure that all are at the same level, to avoid some cutting in the hierarchy. Also, we are not here to do the job for them, so we are looking to train them on destruction by themselves. So we are doing some destruction training, but also some AOD training to let them be able to do the destruction by themselves. Also some weapons marking, and a bit in the same way that in the presentation before, by marking, but we are looking also for different kind of stuff like RFID. For sustainability, we are doing also training of trainer. It's very important that the states have the capacity to train their people by themselves. And we are looking to accompany them to do the training by themselves. So to train the trainer, but also follow the trainer, not just at the first training, but also after, to be sure that they are able to do it. And also some accident prevention. So some risk education on the small arm light weapon and explosive ordnance risk education. And the thing that we are starting to do is some conflict resolution, management, transformation training. Next slide, please. So in the recommended through life safety measure from the table 1 in the report of the group of governmental experts, MAG is covering few parts. Globally, with our training packages on ammunition storekeeper, on store manager, we are covering in theory all parts of the recommended measure from the report with the implementation of the UN explosive hazard classification, for instance, all the 1.1 plus the compatibility group, with marking on the boxes on ammunition. So it was very interesting, the presentation before about this part, but it's something that we can include in the future for this topic. The review on the national regulation also, we are linking with the pre-transfer and transfer and all the ammunition management as a whole. We also support state on the review of the regulation in accordance with the EATG to facilitate a good management system with national and international treaty and convention. For instance, with the CDAO convention, which all states have to be compliant, MAG implement activities from this convention, with a great collaboration with CDAO, office in charge of weapon and ammunition, and all commission under their supervision in country. And to finish, we are helping them to have a better accounting and recording system by assisting partners to create or use existing database adapted to their needs and train them where is needing to have an efficient and sustainable use of those databases. Next slide. Thanks for your time. I will be available if you have any question. And again, thanks to you all. Merci.
Thank you, Angelo, for your experience and presentation. I think you highlighted a couple of important points. One, the importance of risk education when we are talking on ammunition and unexploded ordnance, including after accidents in ammunition sites, but also the importance of and the role that the International Ammunition Technical Guidelines have helping operators on the field like MAG on building capacity in ammunition management with safety in mind in particular. And I think your example on the separation distance between stockpiles and how sound ammunition management helped avoid secondary explosions in Beirut, in the case of Beirut, is a very interesting one. So thank you for that. And now let me focus on the next segment of our panel today, where we will be unpacking ammunition diversion. And we are going to hear first from Ms. Devin Morrow. Devin is head of regional operations at Conflict Armament Research, and her current endeavor focuses on the Mediterranean and Northeast Syria, where she is leading field teams in cooperation with local actors to document and trace seized illicit conflict material, including, of course, ammunition. Devin joined CAR in 2016, and she's worked as investigator supporting work on illicit diversion in Iraq and Lebanon. And prior to joining CAR, she also worked for Active and for Mines Action Canada. So a lot of field experience on this. Devin, please, we are very, very keen to hear about your experience and your lessons learned on diversion.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much. Good morning. Can you go to the next slide, please? So CAR seeks to monitor diversion and identify supply chain weaknesses through documenting and diverted conflict material, including ammunition and weapons, as well as associated material. We then trace this with manufacturing states in order to better secure it. Next, there we go, thank you. So I want to just jump right into this because there's a lot to cover here. What I want to talk about today is 3 key areas, which is the challenge of ammunition diversion, by identifying some of the key types of diversion based on CAR's fieldwork in conflict-affected states, and then how we seek to address these. Next slide. And next, thank you. So the challenge. First of all, ammunition diversion is a global challenge. From 2009 to 2021, CAR found that 26 states recovered more than 600,000 units of diverted conventional ammunition from criminal and terrorist groups. And there's a unique impact of this. The high intensity armed conflict significantly increases ammunition consumption. Unlike weapons, ammunition needs to be replenished at a far faster rate. And as a result, measures taken to control unauthorized access to ammunition have a greater immediate impact on conflict intensity than measures enacted to control just weapons alone. In particular, measures to implement supply-side controls and monitoring activities to address diversion vary considerably among states, which leaves gaps. Indeed, the challenge of monitoring diversion include the traceability of loose ammunition to understand their origin and supply chains. Next slide, please. I want to make a quick, or kind of go over a quick description of how CAR defines or describes ammunition diversion. We acknowledge that it's when an item enters an illicit market and is redirected to an unauthorized end user or end use. This can take place at really any point in the transfer chain, from manufacture all the way to end use. And it can take place in various forms throughout the process. Next slide. Thank you. So this is a kind of a nice overview of the various points in which diversion can occur at any stage in the life cycle of ammunition. As you can see here, there's about a dozen different incident points, and this can occur at any stage. So we have from manufacture, before the transfer, during the transfer, post-delivery and storage, and also end use. And indeed, many of these points can, they are implemented, or they can occur at several points throughout that cycle, not only at a single point. What I want to do today quickly is go over kind of 5 key field examples of what this can look like in reality. Next slide, please. So this is a sort of highlight of some of the most prevalent ways in which CAR has identified diversion. This data, of course, also includes weapons as we identify both, but I wanted to kind of give it a general sense of what we've documented in conflict zones, particularly until 2018. Now, these are cases, of course, that we've been able to identify the specific point of diversion. It only covers material that we can document and trace, and it's only about material diverted into conflict zones. So this typology would likely look quite different if applied to non-conflict affected states such as Western Europe, et cetera. But there's 5 key areas that I want to quickly go over. Next slide, please. So a first example is inadequate stockpile management. CAR observed this at length in several countries, but particularly a good example of this is Afghanistan, where we've been working since 2017. This is the accidental or deliberate diversion through loss and leakage from state stockpiles, which we were able to identify through significant work with local security forces across Afghanistan, as well as documentation in local markets, bazaars, and other sort of more illicit spaces. And this is, of course, identifiable because we can understand the entire supply chain and where these items ended up originally. Next slide, please. A second prevalent type of diversion is unauthorized retransfer, which is the retransfer of ammunition in violation of end use or end user agreements. This is something that CAR has witnessed significantly in Iraq and Syria, particularly during the time period in which the Islamic State had significant territorial control. And these are times in which the end user has been transfer these items onwards in violation of an agreement. In some of these cases, this was a very, very short time period from manufacture to documentation. One of this quick example on the screen right now was only a matter of weeks between the manufacturer and supply to an illicit group. Next slide, please. A third typology that is quite very significant. Indeed, it's CAR's most significant type of diversion is battlefield capture, because items change hands very frequently in conflict. This is something I think we are all very aware of the risks of, particularly given the current situation in Eastern Europe. And it's something that we need to be concerned about in terms of responsibility of where weapons and ammunition are being transferred to because of the quick turnover rate during significant conflict. Next slide, please. The fourth type that CAR has witnessed is state collapse. A good example of this, of course, is Libya, where there's a widespread diversion of former state stockpiles regionally. CAR witnessed previous Libyan stockpiles as far as West Africa and Cote d'Ivoire, and all the way up to the Middle East in Lebanon and in Syria. So a full collapse obviously has significant, and it will have very long-term effects. You know, the Libyan stockpiles are still being documented right across this region. Next slide, please. The fifth type I wanted to acknowledge is state-sponsored diversion. This is something that obviously is a bit more sensitive, and when states are supplying ammunition to non-state actors in conflict. This is significant in conflicts such in parts of East Africa or parts of the Middle East, where we're supplying to non-state actors, and the responsibility in the transfer is immediately lost. And so we need to be aware that these items, particularly ammunition, is consumable by illicit end users as well. So next slide, please. How do we address any of these? A lot of progress has been made by states in securing stockpiles, but stockpile diversion remains a critical source of ammunition diversion. Supply side control, including risk assessments on exports before transfers, is informed by tracing previously diverted ammunition. This is a critical first step for prevention and mitigation. So this is a full cycle that we need to be aware of, and it's only possible through both pre-monitoring and post-delivery monitoring. I also wanted to note in here quickly and thank Robert in his previous presentation for acknowledging AMTAG, which is a marking project being piloted and developed by CAR right now. And I wanted to just note that AMTAG is actually the only post-production solution to render operational ammunition of any age fully traceable to the last legal custodian. And it can be incorporated into production processes as well as applied to ammunition already in service. So it actually fulfills that at every stage of the transfer process. Next slide, please. So what we need is a comprehensive approach. This is what it could look like. The green line on top represents the security measures that could be considered by states to prevent diversion in a comprehensive manner. And that means throughout the supply chain. So from production security all the way through end use, there are points in which we can add in protective measures to ensure that the risk of diversion is severely mitigated. Next slide, please. So the key takeaways I want to just finish up and wrap up here is that diversion can occur at any point in the transfer chain. These types do vary, but measures to prevent, detect, and mitigate them can take place at any point in this. What we need, of course, is a comprehensive approach to address ammunition diversion, a systemic approach that situates PSSM within a wider framework of supply side controls, as well as monitoring and diagnostic activities, which are essential to the entire process. Next slide. And that's actually, I'll wrap up there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Devin, for the rich presentation and the examples that you just shared. I think, yeah, it came across very clearly the multi-dimensional nature of diversion, and that there are different vulnerability points, not only on the stockpiles, and the fact that, you know, you and conflict armament research have been able to gather information and to put it in a typology can help us understand better those different dimensions. I need what you pointed out on the comprehensive approach. It's really useful, and it's actually very well aligned with what we were discussing in the seminar yesterday about, you know, complementing the work on stockpile management with additional layers of security by including user control systems or tracing capabilities, or what you just did, the importance of having a common understanding on a diversion typology, having that typology and using it to understand the problematic better, and to add protective measures in every single stage of the life cycle, from production to disposal or end use. So thank you very much for your contribution. And now we are going to continue unpacking ammunition diversion, but from a slightly different perspective. With Devin's intervention, we've looked at diversion conceptually and based on field research in conflict settings. And our next speaker will bring lessons learned from diversion in non-conflict settings. Her name is Ms. Natalia Polacci, and Natalia is a project manager working at the Brazilian NGO Instituto Pseudopass. And since 2013, Natalia has worked on small arms and ammunition control, focusing on its regulation, origin, tracing, and its human impact. She conducts investigations on small arms and ammunition life cycle and their effects on public security, including differential impacts regarding gender and race. Since 2018, Natalia has managed pilot projects to implement new public policies in direct cooperation with police departments. So, Natalia, over to you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I said I speak on behalf of Pseudopass, which is a Brazilian NGO working since '99 for more effective public security policies. And we do have firearm and ammunition control as one of our core themes of work. We can go to the next slide, please. As said before, we would like to speak about these non-conflict scenarios where we have more fragmented dynamics, but where we also concentrate 3 out of 4 violent deaths in the world, carrying with them all the damage to socioeconomic development that we are aware of. And we have 44 to 80% of them committed with the use of firearms and ammunition, depending on the scenario. And regarding the ammunition used in crimes, what we see from our experience is that usually police institutions or law enforcement institutions are usually overloaded and lack proper resources and end up not investigating the ammunition origin. That is, they usually focus on in the related crimes, the murder or the robbery, but not on how the tools to commit them arrived at the crime scene. We do know a few special units dedicated to understand and to fight this illegal market. We are actually currently working in collaboration with one of them to increase their capacity and effectiveness, and seeing good results in a short term, but this is yet exceptional. We also see that in general, the ammunition seizures registers can be precarious or incomplete, not detailing brands, calibers, other markings. Those details usually will be later registered in forensics reports, but in many cases also those reports can be in a different database or even just in paper or closed documents. We also see many cases of seized ammunition surplus with unsafe and insecure stockpiles. mainly resulting from bottlenecks in their destination decision-making process, or in the bottlenecks in the deactivation and destruction processes. But also all these difficulties, we also see them as symptoms of the fact that this ammunition investigation and management are not yet seen as a strategic effort to reduce armed violence and to fight organized crime in this type of scenario. And this is a misconception that I believe all the efforts made by this group can change and produce an important cascade effect. I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, and here I would like to share that despite the difficulties regarding data collection and registers keeping, profiling and tracing ammunition is possible and produce relevant information. Here we share two formats. One is a systematic analysis. In the portrayed case, we analyzed 3.5 years of seizures in Rio de Janeiro, 500,000 units. And here we were able to make geo-referenced analysis overlapping the map with data on murders, police lethality, the patterns of the firearms seized in the same area, and other types of dynamics. We could also study the pattern of the major seizures that summed a relevant share of the total, trying to identify more effective dynamics. And here we also identified that at least 42% of the total were Brazilian manufactured ammunition, indicating the presence of both local and international dynamics in this illegal market. And the second type is the profiling of emblematic or selected samples from one area or one type of dynamic, as this shell-shocked project mentioned here below, which was developed in partnership with local journalists. And it was based on 140 cartridges collected in favelas after police operations and shootings. And we helped to analyze and trace them, also generating interesting insights on ammunition origin, and also some clues of possible diverted ammunition. And already in our last slide in this initial intervention, I would like to mention marking, especially mentioning that Brazil has individual lot marking since 2003. So in the photo, you can see the marking placement and pattern. It is currently laser marked technology. And during this almost already 2 decades of use of this technology, this marking was crucial to elucidate several crimes, especially those involving organized crime. So militia, vigilante groups, territorial control, these more organized dynamics, but also individual cases and planned executions. Pseudopass has already published some reports with case studies on some cases elucidated based on the ammunition marking. And there are also some detailed media articles that can be very illustrative of the dynamic. And this ammunition marking is also very crucial to identify diversion sources, diversion patterns, enabling us to learn and feedback from them. Especially because currently this lot marking in Brazil is required to ammunition bought only by the armed forces and the law enforcement institutions. But matters mentioned that the industry already stated that they do have the capacity to extend it to the entire national ammunition market. And finally, I would like to mention that despite this marking being an incredible, valuable resource, certainly the marking alone doesn't solve all the problems. And in order to reach its full potential, it needs to be combined with other measures. So we still need to be very attentive to issues as coherent lot sizes, tracing resources to actually use this information in real cases, investigations, the use of these lots and batches as an ammunition distribution criteria within the institutions. So within their units and teams, they need to be used in a rational way. And finally, the general stockpile security management to avoid diversion. And I think here I leave you, but already looking forward to the questions, commentaries. I think in the last slide, I share my email, and we are also available through our website.
Thank you very much, Natalia. And yes, we will be sharing our panelists' emails as well in the chat in case you want to reach out and continue the conversation. But I will highlight a few of your important messages, Natalia. I think you touched upon the utility and importance of ammunition controls in non-conflict settings, like in the case of Brazil, and you very clearly kind of like broke a stereotype, I think, which is that individual or a lot marking of rounds of a small caliber ammunition is feasible, and it is working in that context. And it addresses two objectives, one diversion prevention and the other one improved tracing. So that is quite important, I feel, because this could help national authorities depending on their particular context if they decide to do so. And the other point that I think was very clear is that marking alone doesn't solve the problems, but it is coupled with record keeping and subsequent tracing capabilities, which also helps national authorities. So with that, thank you. And I will now pass to our last contribution or last briefing today that will be delivered by Mr. Emile Lebrun. And we'll focus on gender mainstreaming of the life cycle management of ammunition. Emile is a project coordinator and research consultant for the Small Arms Survey, whose current projects focus on gender, ammunition, diversion, and illicit arms monitoring in conflict zone. So, Emile, over to you now.
Thank you very much, Manu. And thanks to the UNIDIR team on behalf of the Small Arms Survey for the chance to participate in this important webinar and to share some of the analysis and research on gender and ammunition management that's been produced under a project for the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs in 2020 and 2021. Could we have the next slide, please? Okay, so in the next 7 or 8 minutes, I'd like to do the following. First, touch very briefly on the gender elements that appear in the final report of the group of governmental experts from last year. Second, review what the gender mainstreaming of the life cycle management of ammunition might look like, and in specific in terms of of the meaningful participation of women and men in the work of ammunition management, and also in terms of the application of a gender analysis throughout the life cycle. Then I'll say a few words briefly about gender and the impacts of ammunition diversion and how the gender lens might provide some suggestions for how states could approach certain aspects of diversion monitoring. And then I'll end with some thoughts about how member states and national authorities might consider implementing aspects of the research and analysis on gender and ammunition that's been produced so far in their ongoing deliberations and practices. Next slide, please. I won't have time to elaborate really point by point on what the GGE's final report has to say about gender, but it's covered in its own dedicated section in paragraphs 78 to 81 of the report, and it's really remarkably prominent. In the interest of time, I'll just summarize the group's recommendations by saying that the group indicated there was scope for addressing gender mainstreaming within the context of conventional ammunition management policy. It suggested that doing so would bring such practices in line with other relevant commitments, such as the Agenda 2030, WPS, disarmament, and arms control. And it indicated that gender mainstreaming should be considered throughout the life cycle of ammunition using a gender analysis to identify entry points. But what would it really mean to gender mainstream ammunition management policy and practice? And what would it mean to use gender analysis to identify relevant entry points? I will provide some answers to these questions based on the work that we've done over the last 2 years, together with the UN Office of Disarmament Affairs. Next slide. So there are two gender concepts to apply here, gender mainstreaming and gender analysis. Gender mainstreaming means reflecting a commitment to gender equality in all policies and processes, that is, aiming for the meaningful participation of women and men in all its aspects. And gender analysis means thinking about and taking account of how gender roles and expectations affect the context in which work is being done. So just very briefly, some basic observations in both of these areas. In terms of the need for gender mainstreaming, there's been a number of studies that have that look at the underrepresentation of women in the sector of weapons and ammunition management. And here I'd like to draw attention to recent excellent work that's been done by my colleagues at UNIDIR to unpack these dynamics in further detail and provide suggestions for how states can be encouraged to actively recruit more women into these functions. But part of the challenge we face in gender mainstreaming ammunition practice is not having a clear sense of the relevant gender breakdown of the specific roles. So there's a transparency component to these discussions that also needs to be addressed. Gender mainstreaming also means that any safety and security guidelines to be developed need to be done so in a gender sensitive way. And in a moment, I'll talk about what we've done with the ammunition technical guidelines. On the gender analysis side, this implies always ensuring that there is a diversity of voices in any relevant conversation, especially those that are typically excluded or underrepresented, and thinking about impacts and effects, including who suffers when things go wrong, as in the cases of explosions at munition sites or diversion incidents, which I'll come back to in a moment. What gender analysis really means is that gender is always on the table, whether we're talking about which manufacturers are contracted to produce ammunition, or what considerations need to be taken into account when making a determination to dispose of surplus ammunition by selling it and exporting it to country X, Y, or Z. This happens all across the life cycle of ammunition. Next slide, please. In the Small Arms Survey UNODA report, Making Room for Improvement, Gender Dimensions of the Life Cycle Management of Ammunition, we applied these principles to the planning, procurement, stockpile management, and disposal stages of LCMA to start a conversation about what the full gender mainstreaming of ammunition management policy and practice might look like across these different stages and elements. Without going into too much detail about all of these at the moment, there are many opportunities to consider, starting with an active process to implement existing gender equality commitments to the entire life cycle of ammunition. Selection criteria and policy requirements of vendors and any third parties involved in ammunition production, shipment, or storage. Incorporation of diverse and inclusive consultations for the establishment or the, let's say, for example, the location of storage facilities, and ensuring that exports meet any relevant and applicable gender-related criteria. For example, the gender-based violence risk assessment criteria for states parties to the ATT, which covers ammunition. At the end of this intervention, I'll provide a link to this publication so that readers can review these observations and many others like them in more detail. Next slide, please. One element I want to highlight is the gender mainstreaming of the International Ammunition Technical Guidelines. In December 2020, UNODA recommended a review of the IATG version 3 modules to ensure gender mainstreaming, specifically the reflection of gender inclusive language and general gender-related considerations and principles. Small Arms Survey undertook this review last year and proposed changes to be made to the language of 6 modules. These changes were eventually accepted and approved by the IATG's Technical Review Board, which oversees the updates and revisions to the guidelines. In general, proposed changes included making references to personnel gender neutral, edits that ensured that references to the physical bodies of personnel are likewise gender inclusive, covering considerations of gender appropriate personal protective equipment or blast effects on different bodies, and so on, and that risks for gender bias in considerations of personnel competencies and in consultations with local community stakeholders are reduced. Next slide, please. Before I conclude, I want to pose a few questions about ammunition security in terms of impacts and why gender is important in considering them. And the questions are, how will we know when ammunition security practices are improving or worsening? What are the gendered impacts of diversion? Can authorities identify diverted ammunition when it's used in crimes, for example, against women? And how can data for SDG indicator 16.4.2 on illicit flows be generated? Yesterday, a number of speakers talked about the emphasis that has been placed on diversion monitoring, which relate primarily to the detection of ammunition diversion by the authorities responsible for security. But I think it's also important to understand and to be able to quantify and analyze not only how and why diversion takes place, but what its impacts are. And this, I think, connects very much to what some of our other speakers have just said. For example, how is diverted ammunition used in crime and violence against men and women, and who suffers as a result? These are important indicators about whether we're collectively doing better or worse about ammunition security. I think what we're learning is that national authorities may not always be equipped to detect these impacts, and that they should be supported in being able to do so. This would also have the added benefit of generating data under SDG 16.4.2 on illicit weapon flows, which is understood to include ammunition. Next slide. To conclude, my suggestions for extending the observations presented here in a very summarized form, and which are fully consistent with the recommendations of the GGE's final report, would be to make use of the work that's been done to date on gender and LCMA to identify gender entry points in a more fully elaborated through-life management of ammunition model, consolidate existing gendered understandings of ammunition management practice when considering an eventual political framework, use gender analysis as a tool when developing the eventual security-oriented voluntary guidelines to ensure that they're fully gender sensitive, and learning from the IATG gender review process. And finally, provide support and guidance for authorities to monitor diverted ammunition and their gendered impacts. I'll end here, but maybe we can just show the last slide. Thank you, with the two publications that I've drawn on for these comments, and I'll put the links in the chat as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emil, as well for your findings and your presentation on these two streams of research that you've been conducting. I take the importance of meaningful participation, of course, in traditionally male-dominated sector, the gender analysis, the importance of integrating gender analysis in guidance. And I think this is something that the open-ended working group will probably look into as they move forward, and the gender impacts of diversion. So now we've reached an hour, but we still have time for questions and answers. And I've seen that there are some questions already trickling in the Q&A function. So I'm very happy to now pose them to the audience. But before I do that, I would like to actually follow up with you, Emil, on one of the things that you've mentioned at the end of the presentation. You've touched on the overlap between diversion and gender impacts. And I was wondering how authorities can monitor better those impacts. What is needed at a practical level to get that information? If you can help us with that. Over to you.
Okay, thanks, Manu. And maybe you can ask, maybe some of the other participants can jump in here, Natalia as well, because their work is doing some of this exact same research. But as part of the work that we've done for ODA, we've conducted pilot research to assess to what extent authorities can identify diverted ammunition when it's recovered in crimes. Let's say absent of special markings that might be added to ammunition that's destined for national authorities, law enforcement, army, and so on. And the ability to identify diverted ammunition when it's recovered is a first step to being able to specify what the association of diversion is with different kinds of violence, including gender-based violence, but also just in profiling the different kinds of ammunition that would be associated with crime. And we work in our pilot with UNDP CSAC closely, and the Kosovo firearm focal point. Firearm focal points are European Union funded project in different parts of Southeastern Europe to bring together for crime information, victimization information, and legal data and information to produce intelligence reports. To cut a long story short, I think the answer to the question based on the piloting that we've done is that even sort of sophisticated mechanisms that pull together different kind of information may not be readily constructed to identify diverted ammunition. And it's something that Natalia mentioned in her presentation as well. Data exists, but it's in a different sort of database or a different data set. We're talking about head stamps primarily, taking markings from head stamps. And that in terms of what's needed, it can be something as simple as information sharing protocols, reporting templates, fundamental measures like that that can allow authorities to do better about profiling the ammunition and thereby identifying which ammunition's been diverted. And the key is to make that done, to have that done in an automated way, because as Natalia mentioned, law enforcement entities are completely overwhelmed in just responding to homicides and crimes, and the idea of identifying patterns of trafficking is perhaps secondary. Thanks.
Thank you, Emil, for this comprehensive response. And yeah, based also on our own Unity research on ammunition profiling, I would say that one of the very important first steps is changing those processes at the response level to the authorities that are recovering ammunition, so the information can be captured accurately on the impacts, and that helps a lot on further investigation. And as you said, sometimes those are secondary, but by aggregation of that information, it could bring some light into ammunition trends and how it is being trafficked or misused in different contexts. So thank you for that. And you already gave me a very nice segue to Natalia, because I'm sure you will have a lot to share on this particular issue. So please, Natalia, if you can share your thoughts on how to better monitor the impact of misuse of ammunition that is diverted, that would be useful. But I would also like to give you the opportunity to answer some of the other questions that we have. One of them was asking how it is actually a small caliber ammunition marked, and there are a couple of questions there on how that happens in terms of the technical process. And I would add an additional question there, which is how long did it take to include the lot marking requirement in the Brazilian case, in the national legislation? How was that process, how it unfolded? I think that would be also interesting and relevant for national authorities working at their level, but also for those participating in the open-ended working.
Great. So starting by sharing a bit on the diversion and data analysis, I think we already saw very different scenarios and starting points. Some law enforcement institutions do have some kind of database under development, but even those usually have fragmented databases. So usually information on the seizure, which means information on the date, on the exact place, on the related crimes, on the victim profile, including concerns regarding gender and race, in one database, and the detailed description of the ammunition is in another database when we are lucky. Sometimes they are in paper or in closed PDF or similar formats. But even in those cases, it is possible to do a profiling and a tracing analysis using samples, or even using technologies as programming and coding to extract information from this type of documents and later merge those databases. But I also would like to share that in this pilot project that we are currently developing with one law enforcement institution in Brazil, we are seeing very good advancements in a short period of time, stimulating them to create a unified flow of information. So since the first police officer puts their hands in the ammunition until its full destruction or deactivation, all information on this ammunition to be recorded and consolidated in one database. This is under development, but what we saw is that when the police officers see the potential of this information regarding fighting illicit market and fighting organized crime especially, they do get engaged and do want to invest their time and their resources in this type of endeavor. And I think on the question about smaller calibers of ammunition, we do know that some very small calibers of ammunition or ammunition that are made of plastic or rubber in some parts of it, we know so far that the industry alleges that they cannot be marked individually with the lot numbers. But we think that's something that deserves to be constantly reassessed as the technologies do evolve very fast. But mainly, I would like to mention that in Brazil, this is not such an issue because we do mark just the ammunition sold to armed forces and law enforcement institutions, which usually do not use this type of ammunition. But mainly that the inability to mark a specific type of ammunition do not need to stop the marking of important shares of the ammunition market. What I mean is if those smaller or plastic made ammunitions cannot be marked and they represent up until 10% of the entire market, marking the other 90% or 50% or even 30% of the market is already a huge step ahead, a huge leap of quality in the potential to trace and understand the ammunition origin and mainly to identify diversion sources. And the last point about the process to include lot marking in Brazil, it took around 2 to 3 years to be included in the legislation, but it was part of a much larger package of firearm and ammunition changes under debate. And it was back in the 2000s when the technology was much less known. So I imagine that a similar process nowadays would benefit from having more evidence on technology availability and on the resulting benefits already documented. And I also think it matters to mention that despite the legal regulation is certainly desired, the lot marking can also be done in a volunteer basis, mainly thinking on the purchase requirements from public institutions, so armed forces and law enforcement agencies, because they buy larger amounts. So once we have manufacturers with installed capacity, this can be a requirement made to those manufacturers. And all of them also tend to respond to growing demands from consumers. So it's also important to present this demand and increase the awareness of the industry as well.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you for making that point, because I think we are already seeing how national authorities, law enforcement, or armed forces in a specific context in certain regions, and I'm thinking in the Latin American context, that are resorting to that type of practice, including in their procurement requirements, certain conditions in the marking to help them prevent diversion and help them improve tracing themselves. So that is a very good, and thank you also for the specification that you made on the importance of applying the technology to marking certain calibers when it is important. And also I think that the issue of smaller calibers, it's also interesting from a, let's say, impact perspective. What are the calibers that are, in the hands of, let's say, criminal groups or terrorists or going to conflict? Maybe those are the calibers that need further attention and focus, and know the calibers that are not causing that much harm in that sense. But I think with this, I would also like to gather a couple of the questions that are coming in and direct them to Devin, because some of them relate to the conflict stage, let's say. And one of them was asking about what would be the way out to prevent diversion in a conflict situation. And it was pointing towards the importance of improving stockpile management practices. But when a conflict happens, when a conflict erupts, then there's there's forces and events that are more unpredictable. So what can be done in terms of preventing diversions in across the peace continuum, let's say, pre-conflict, during conflict, after conflict? Over to you.
Thank you. I mean, it's obviously the most important question I think that we all have. And I mean, I think what I want to emphasize, it's been said several times by everyone else here, is that marking is such an essential tool. And there's many new ways we can adopt to develop marking technology. It'll be more effective. You know, I've spent a lot of time in the field reading head stamps, which doesn't really tell you a lot other than where it started. And I think some of the really interesting ways in which marking technology is evolving will allow us to understand the full supply chain. It's a lot easier to do that with weapons, with ammunition packaging, where you have a much more fulsome understanding of the supply chain throughout the entire process from manufacture, pre-transfer, transfer, post-delivery. With loose ammunition, you know, my own biggest experience has been such a frustration that beyond the head stamp, you don't have much more. So, you know, I want to emphasize again, technology like AmTag that CAR is developing is such an essential tool. And I think it's one of the easiest things we can implement right now that will have a significant impact on our ability to understand supply chains and points of diversion. And, you know, if we can really adopt that and have more states using that and more throughout the whole process, that's going to have an impact. And that's also going to help with PSSM measures, you know, and one thing that CAR has found out is that because we're using trace requests to identify supply chains, the last thing you really want to have is the last legal custodian. You know, then it becomes your responsibility to what happens to it next. And so by having much more comprehensive marking and documentation, we have a better understanding of where those points of diversion take place.
Thanks, Devin. Absolutely, the need to focus on all those stages that you mentioned and the elements that could support a comprehensive response to a diversion in every single stage of the life cycle. I think that is essential. Thanks for pointing that out, in particular in the context of conflicts, and also the fact that there are with the current practices, there are certain limitations on the information that can be extracted from head stamps as well. With this, I would like now to turn to Angelo and also gather his thoughts on the key points helping MAG and operators on the field responding and preventing explosions at stockpiles and depots to provide effective assistance and make sure that there are good management systems in place. So Angelo, over to you.
Thanks, Manuel. So for me, there's a few key points to be able to put in place this effectiveness. First of all, is to have a real trust between the organizations and the partner, because if you can't have the access to everything, you can't do a proper assessment and to resolve the issue if you have issues. In seconds, for us, we have a very high level of transparency with our partner and to avoid any leakage about information that they can share with us. To be sure that they have this confidence with us. So it's crucial for us. So that means that we have to keep the information just between the partner and us. We never share anything with nobody to be sure that everything will be confidential. Otherwise, with the work that we are doing in some region, you have some exchange between people, like in this kind of webinar or with a meeting convention. So people are sharing their experience between the other states, and after that we have this kind of reputation where people know what we are doing, how we are doing, or how we are dealing with every issue on this ammunition life cycle management. And they are coming to us to ask some assistance. Sorry. So, and the last things, but not the least, we have to, I would say that we have to have a good relationship with people. It's very important to have some soft skills and to be able to share and work with this kind of partner because of the sensitivity, sorry, of these topics. You know that it's really sensitive in countries. You can't share all the information, how many weapons, how many ammunition, where is it, etc. So this needs to be very clear between partner and NGOs or other organizations. Hope answer to your question, Manu.
Yes, absolutely, Angelo. Thank you very much for this. I'd like to now, turn to Robert because you went first and you've been patiently waiting there. You haven't answered yet questions, but I wanted to ask you, Robert, and there are a few questions I think pointing towards directly to you on I think the marking issue is gaining a lot of attention, and the question is what to do with let's say polymer ammunition. Is there anything that needs to be taken into account when marking that type of ammunition, and which methodologies could allow for permanent marking? And in another question, and I will open this one also to both Robert and Devin, what do you think head stamp ammunition, the marking on the head stamp what information should be included as a minimum requirement for head stamp marking to allow and to help preventing diversion and reducing those risks and improving tracing? So first over to Robert and then to Devin.
Yes, thanks Manu for the question. When talking about polymer materials, I think it makes sense also to look into the percentage of the ammunition produced. So, and of course also to distinguish between military used ammunition and ammunition being used for the civilian market as sporting and hunting ammunition, for sure. As Natalia mentioned, that we have some 10% maybe for civilian ammunition. But when it comes to polymer, for sure, the chemical taggant, that could be a quite good solution and a sustainable solution to look for in the future. But of course, we still have to focus on what is the main problem. And I think we're talking about mainly about military used ammunition, or let's say ammunition used by military forces. And of course, head stamping, the problem we can see is that we have very limited amount of information available, which especially it's a problem for forensic issues. So it would be quite good for this reason to have a lot number, which includes much more information regarding the manufacturer, the year of manufacturing, which allows for much better tracing at the end of the day. And therefore, maybe the head stamping as itself is limited to the amount of information we can get from it. And a good solution for this could be the laser marking. As we can see, it's already been used and practiced in quite some countries. And so for this is just to mention that we can use all the space of the ammunition for lasering the ammunition we want to have on it.
Thanks, Robert. Over to you, Devin.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously head stamps, the more information, the better. You can add a lot more in a chemical marking, but at the very least, I think, me and my colleagues would recommend that at the very least a head stamp should include the manufacturer, the year, the caliber, any special designations like AP or incendiary, a specific factory or country would be very useful. We are only end up learning what those are through having a huge data set to then identify factories and countries. But at the very least, that's a lot of information that is quite easy to include on a head stamp, and then more could be added in an additional tagging process.
Thank you, Devin. Well, I think we've covered a lot on the, let's say, diversion side of things, or security dimension. And there's also an additional question here on the safety consideration, which is what in the experience of the experts could lead to those type of accidents. And For that, I think we have with us our colleague Samuel Paunila from the Ammunition Management Advisory Team, who actually was part of the team who responded to the explosion in Equatorial Guinea last year. So I would like to ask Samuel if he is here and if we can put him on the screen and the spotlight to share some of his thoughts on the response and what make responses to accidents like the one in Equatorial Guinea effective, but also, yeah, what are the leading causes for these accidents when they happen?
Thank you very much, Manuel, and good day and evening to everybody. Yes, my name is Samuel. I'm heading Ammunition Management Advisory Team. We are a team based in Geneva and we travel a lot. We work closely with the United Nations Safeguard Program, and as one of the responses that we do on a monthly basis, we went to Equatorial Guinea after the explosion there about a year ago. Couple of quick takeaways from there. Often the root causes and the lead causes for these accidents are human errors and lack of systems and procedures. Or then when the systems and procedures are in place, then there will be lack of accountability, checks and balances. So when you have an inventory, it's no use if you don't have any checks and if nobody is really accountable, everybody being responsible, as we sometimes say. But about those takeaways, you know, a lot of people died and even more people lost their everything. Think about the parking lot in the middle of a city of Bata, suddenly, you know, more than 1 kilometer in radius, and all the buildings destroyed, including a school, hospital, conference hall, and so forth. This accident was entirely preventable. And this is not to point fingers at all or anything, but it's just the management was not present, the responsibilities were not clear, there was no inventory, and it was actually civilian mining operators, so quarrying companies that parked according to rules given to them by the government. They parked their sea containers filled with detonators and ammonium nitrate. Much of that also, that explosive materials were expired. You know, there were dozens of these containers outside of the military compound, which was supposed to look after them. But also people lived in this same area. So when people cook with open fire and the fire then escapes when there is a bit of a wind, then one of the, well, in this case, one of those containers got warm enough to explode and then causing a mass detonation of altogether, I remember, 56 containers, which then initiated and ignited the military explosives and ammunition in the nearby barracks. So that was about the cause of the accident, and my team spent 11 days there doing the investigation, preventing further accidents from occurring, but very importantly, making recommendations then for risk mitigation, and even more importantly, now that we were unhappy to come to a site after an incident, it's much better to prevent these things. Another takeaway was like that while we were very happy with the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs in New York, so quickly activating this United Nations Safeguard Program quick response mechanism, which we were part of now, you know, someone to the area very quickly. You know, there should be some instrument, some program that would make this management a bit more, let's say, standardized around the world, but also responses should be resourced and planned in advance so that we could do things before bad things happen, and, you know, go to check whether everything is okay before hundreds die and thousands are left homeless. I will stop here. Thank you, Manuel.
Thank you very much, Sam, for yeah, the stark reminder of the impact, and also the importance of not only response but prevention, and the issue of encroaching and quantity distances and separation from civilian housing and so on. We are very close to coming to an end of the webinar, but I want to take 1 more minute of your time, and I would like all the panelists to answer in 30 seconds one very short and practical question. So, in your opinion, if you had the possibility to do just one practical thing, regardless of resources and capacity, just one practical thing to improve ammunition management, what would that be? And I'd start with you, Robert.
Yeah, I would recommend to use the technical capabilities we have, and to communicate them well, and to agree upon each other, and to find a good, let's say, transparency way to handle this kind of technology in an appropriate way.
Thank you, Robert. Angelo, what would you do or propose?
So my main things, and is one of the things that we are doing, I think it will be to clean up all the ammunition storage by destruction of surplus and obsolete ammunition with a proper good database that can be used to have a better system for purchase, user, and end user, to have a proper life cycle management, basically.
Thank you. Devin.
We would emphasize monitoring, documenting, and tracing, of course, with better understanding of ammunition diversion to then create better risk assessments and have a more comprehensive response to vulnerabilities in the systems.
Thank you very much. Natalia.
I think in addition to what has already been said, I would say to build capacity, to have one specialized law enforcement unit to fight ammunition, illegal market, in each country or each national department.
I appreciate it. Thanks. And finally, Emil, please go ahead.
Thank you. I was furiously trying to respond to one of the questions in the chat by Charles Zach. So maybe I'll use this platform to try to answer that. I mean, I think I will echo what Natalia just said. I think in order to establish the value of things like marking and tracing and their connection to better diversion prevention, that we need to give national authorities the capacities and support them to do better to identify diverted ammunition when it happens. Because at the moment there's a bit of a gap between, we know that diversion happens, but we don't know what happens to it afterwards, and we don't know what the connection is between improvements to or identifying what happens to diverted ammunition and improvements in practices. So I think that monitoring effort is really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Emil, and thanks to everyone for bearing with us a couple more minutes. Maybe before closing, I will share a couple of points. The first one, that the recording of the session will be made available on both Unity's website and the YouTube channel. So that will be posted there. And then secondly, that we will, I know that there's been a lot of questions and a lot of interest, and that is great. And we haven't been able to respond to all of those questions, but we will be reaching out separately to provide an answer. So with this, I want to thank really all the panelists for your outstanding job, presentations, and sharing of your experiences. You've been great, and you've shared a lot of information. And I want also to thank the Unity team in the background, Matilde and Ruben, who made this possible, and of course, all participants for questions, engagements, and comments. Thank you very much.